The rain hammered the tin roof like accusations Evelyn had long buried. Each drop a reminder of the day her mother signed the papers and walked away without a backward glance. She was 12, small enough to hide in the attic rafters, clutching the locket her father had given her before he vanished into the bottle years prior. By dawn, the house that had cradled her whispers and dreams stood empty, sold to strangers who painted over the crayon marks on her bedroom wall. The ones that mapped out a future she could almost taste, sweet as wild honeysuckle in June. Evelyn Harper never forgave the silence that followed. Her mother, Lydia, remarried a man from Burlington with a voice like gravel and hands that demanded order, pulling them into a sterile apartment where the walls echoed with unspoken regrets. Evelyn learned early to fold her grief into neat corners, like the linens her mother ironed on Sundays, but it always unraveled in the quiet hours. School became her escape, a brick building in Montpelier where she buried herself in books about far-off places, Parisian cafes, dusty libraries in Oxford, anywhere the air didn't carry the scent of pine and betrayal. By 16, Evelyn's world had sharpened into edges she couldn't dull. She discovered her heart's true north in the library stacks, stealing glances at Clara, the senior with sun-kissed skin and a laugh that bloomed like morning glories. Their first kiss happened behind the bleachers after a soccer game, tentative and electric, Evelyn's fingers trembling as they traced the curve of Clara's jaw. It was a revelation, this pull toward softness in a body that mirrored her own, a secret language of stolen moments and whispered promises. But Lydia found the note, Clara's handwriting looping like vines, and the fallout was swift. "This isn't us," her mother hissed, eyes wide with a fear Evelyn mistook for disgust. "You're confused, baby. We'll fix it." Therapy sessions followed, sterile rooms with clocks that ticked too loudly, where a counselor named Dr. Ellis probed her like a wound. Evelyn sat rigid, arms crossed, refusing to name the ache that Clara's absence had carved out. The girl had transferred schools by winter, her family citing better opportunities. But Evelyn knew the truth. Whispers in the hallways, a parent's quiet ultimatum. Lydia drove her to those appointments in silence, the Vermont hills rolling past like indifferent witnesses, their peaks dusted with the first snow. "It's for your own good," her mother would say, voice cracking just enough to hint at her own unraveling. But good felt like erasure, like scrubbing the freckles from Evelyn's cheeks or the curve of her smile that Clara had called dangerous. The house in Willow Creek haunted her dreams, that old Victorian with its wraparound porch and attic window framing the Adirondacks. Built by her great-grandparents in the 1920s, it had been a haven, summers spent chasing fireflies with her father, winters huddled by the fireplace as Lydia read aloud from dog-eared copies of Little Women. After his death from the cancer that hollowed him out like a storm-felled oak, Lydia clung to the place until the mortgage gnawed them dry. Selling it wasn't just business, it was surrender. Evelyn remembered the realtor's voice, oily and efficient, as boxes piled up in the driveway. "Fresh start," he'd said, clapping Lydia on the back. But for Evelyn it was the end of gravity, the moment her world tilted and she began to drift. High school blurred into a haze of rebellion. Evelyn cut her hair short, dyed it raven black, and wore flannel shirts unbuttoned just enough to challenge the stares. She dated boys to prove a point, quick fumbles in pickup trucks that left her hollow, but her nights belonged to journals filled with poetry about Clara's ghost. "You are the river I cannot ford," she wrote once, ink smudging under tears. Lydia watched from afar, her new husband, Harlan, filling the apartment with his tools and temper. He tolerated Evelyn's silences but drew the line at her phases, as he called them. One evening, over pot roast that tasted of ash, he suggested military school. Straighten her out. Lydia's fork paused midair, her eyes meeting Evelyn's in a rare flicker of alliance. "She's my daughter," she murmured, but the words dissolved into the clink of dishes. Graduation came like an exhale. Evelyn packed a duffel with her mother's old quilt, the one stitched with maple leaves, and boarded a Greyhound to Portland, Oregon, chasing rumors of a city where rain washed away judgments. The job at the bookstore was serendipity, shelves groaning under volumes of Audre Lorde and Virginia Woolf, their words a balm on her raw edges. There she met June, a barista with tattooed forearms and eyes like smoked quartz. June was unapologetic, her laugh a defiance that drew Evelyn in like a moth to lantern light. Their first date was a picnic in Forest Park. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, the air thick with Douglas fir. "Tell me your secrets," June said, leaning close, her breath warm against Evelyn's ear. And Evelyn did, haltingly at first, then in a rush, the house, the sale, Clara's shadow. June listened without interruption, her hand steady on Evelyn's knee, an anchor in the storm. But wounds have roots, and Evelyn's tangled deep. Portland's drizzle mirrored her moods. Gray days bleeding into nights where she'd wake gasping from dreams of the attic, the rain relentless. June tried. Poetry slams in lofts, weekend hikes along the Columbia Gorge. But Evelyn's silences grew thicker. A wall built from Vermont granite. "You're here but not," June said one night, candles guttering on their shared windowsill. Evelyn wanted to argue, to say it was the ghosts, not her, but the words stuck like burrs. By fall, June was gone, leaving behind a note on the fridge. "Love you enough to let you go find yourself." Alone again, Evelyn wandered the aisles of the bookstore, fingers trailing spines like lifelines. Customers came and went, hipsters with lattes, retirees seeking mysteries, but she felt adrift, a leaf in the Willamette current. One afternoon a package arrived, forwarded from Montpelier. Lydia's handwriting on the label, fragile as frost. Inside was the locket, tarnished but intact, and a letter. "Harlan's gone. Cancer quick like your daddy's. The apartment's too empty. Come home." Evelyn held it to her chest, the metal cool against her skin, and for the first time in years, the rain outside seemed to whisper rather than shout. Home. The word tasted of salt and pine, a summons she couldn't ignore. She drove east through November's bare branches, the Volvo she'd bought used humming like an old hymn. Vermont unfolded in layers, first the flatlands of New York, then the Green Mountains rising like sentinels, their slopes etched with the scars of old fires. Willow Creek appeared at dusk, a cluster of clapboard houses hugging the Connecticut River, gas lamps flickering along Main Street. The childhood home loomed at the edge of town, repainted white but sagging under neglect, its porch swing rotted through. The current owners, a couple from Boston, had let it fall to ruin, their weekends in the city leaving it to the mercy of harsh winters. Evelyn parked and stepped out, boots crunching gravel. The air was crisp, laced with wood smoke and the faint rot of fallen leaves. She touched the gatepost, where she'd carved her initials as a girl, now softened by lichen. Inside her chest something cracked, a fissure letting in light, or perhaps just more rain. Lydia waited in the diner across the street, her hair silvered, face lined like the river's banks. They embraced awkwardly, bones pressing through thin sweaters, the scent of chamomile tea clinging to her mother's coat. "I sold it to pay for your future," Lydia said over coffee, voice barely above the clatter of spoons. "College, a life away from here. But I see now. I sold more than wood and nails." Tears came then, hot and unbidden, mingling with the steam from their mugs. Evelyn spoke of Portland, of June's departure, of the way love had felt like a house with no foundation. Lydia listened, her hands folding and unfolding a napkin, the weight of years pressing down. "I was scared," she admitted finally, "of losing you like I lost him. Thought fixing you would fix us." The admission hung between them, a bridge half built over churning waters. Outside, the first snow dusted the rooftops, blanketing Willow Creek in fragile white. That night, Evelyn walked the property alone, flashlight beam cutting through darkness. The attic window glowed faintly from a neighbor's porch light, and she imagined her 12-year-old self there, knees drawn up, plotting escape. But escape had led her in circles back to this threshold. The realtor's sign was gone, the house listed again. Foreclosure whispers in town. On impulse, she called the number at dawn, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. How much to buy it back? The figure was steep, savings drained, but she wired it anyway, the click of confirmation echoing like a key turning in a long-locked door. Renovations began in spring, the thaw bringing robins and the hum of chainsaws. Evelyn hired locals, widows with calloused hands, veterans with steady eyes, transforming rot into renewal. She sanded floors herself, the scent of pine rising like incense, each stroke erasing strangers' footprints. Lydia helped on weekends, her arthritic fingers tracing wallpaper patterns she'd chosen decades ago. "Remember the lightning bugs?" she'd say, and Evelyn would nod, the memory a spark in the dim. But healing isn't linear. It twists like the river. Sleepless nights brought Clara's face, superimposed on the ceiling beams, and doubts crowded in. Had she returned for redemption or just revenge? One evening, as thunder rumbled over the hills, a knock shattered the quiet. On the porch stood a woman, drenched and shivering, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Saw the ad in the paper," she said, teeth chattering. "Room for rent? Name's Riley Tate. Ran out of options in Burlington." Evelyn hesitated, the ad a whim. Testing the waters of sharing this space. Riley was mid-30s like her, with cropped blonde hair and a tattoo peeking from her sleeve. A compass rose, needles pointing true. Her eyes, blue as alpine lakes, held a weariness Evelyn recognized, the kind forged in family fires. "Come in," she said finally, handing over a towel. As Riley dried off, stories spilled. Disowned after coming out, couch surfing through winters that bit deeper than judgment. Evelyn poured tea, the steam curling like unspoken invitations, and for the first time since Portland, the house felt less like a tomb and more like a hearth. End of file 1 to 1012 words. Riley's presence settled into the house like sunlight filtering through storm clouds, gradual and unassuming. Mornings found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, experimenting with biscuits that flaked like autumn leaves. Recipes pilfered from her grandmother's faded index cards. Evelyn watched from the doorway, coffee mug warm in her palms, the way Riley's hands moved with quiet precision, kneading doubt into something nourishing. It was a rhythm Evelyn hadn't known she craved. This shared domesticity, the clink of spoons against porcelain echoing softer than her solitary echoes. Willow Creek unfolded around them in lazy loops. The town was a patchwork of general stores and craft fairs, where locals gathered under strung lights to trade gossip and jars of maple syrup. Evelyn introduced Riley at the feed store, where old Mr. Harlan, unrelated to her stepfather, eyed her with the squint of appraisal. "Heard you're fixing up the old Whitaker place," he grunted, handing over nails in a paper bag. Riley grinned, easy as pie crust, turning it into something worthwhile. "Ever think of boarding a horse there?" The banter flowed and Evelyn felt a pang. Not jealousy, but wonder at how Riley navigated spaces she'd long armored herself against. Evenings brought porch swings repaired with fresh rope, the two of them swaying as fireflies danced in the meadow beyond. Riley spoke of Montana, her childhood in Bozeman's wide skies, where she'd learned to rope calves and hide her first crush on the ranch hand's daughter. "She smelled like hay and rebellion," Riley said, voice low, stars pricking the velvet dark. Evelyn shared fragments of Clara, the bleacher's damp chill. The note crumpled in her fist. Laughter came unexpectedly, a release like pressure from a kettle, and tears too, wiped away with the back of a hand. "We carry them like extra weight," Riley murmured once, her shoulder brushing Evelyn's. "But maybe we can share the load." Yet shadows lingered, fed by Lydia's visits. Her mother arrived with casseroles and cautionary tales, eyes flicking to Riley with the wariness of one who'd bartered safety for survival. "She's bold," Lydia said after Riley's departure for a shift at the diner. Evelyn stiffened, stirring soup that bubbled too vigorously. "She's kind, Mom. And real." The air thickened, unspoken histories rising like steam. Lydia set down her spoon, fingers tracing the table's grain. "I pushed you away once. Don't want that again." It was the closest to apology she'd come. A olive branch Evelyn grasped tentatively, the wood still green. Work on the house accelerated, walls opening like confessions. Evelyn envisioned more than shelter. A haven for those adrift. Like Riley, women seeking refuge from families that sold their worth for propriety. She pored over grants in the town library, its oak shelves heavy with Vermont lore, dreaming of bunk rooms with quilts and a library nook stocked with voices like hers. Riley caught the fever, sketching floor plans on napkins, her artist's eye honed in community theater, envisioning murals of rivers and roots. "A place where love doesn't have to hide," she said, pencil between teeth, and Evelyn's heart stuttered. The word love, a bridge she wasn't ready to cross. Conflict brewed in subtler ways. A letter arrived from Portland, June's handwriting a ghost. "Heard you're back east. Miss your fire. Coffee sometime." Evelyn burned it in the fireplace, flames devouring the ink, but the ash clung to her thoughts. Riley noticed the distance, the way Evelyn's laughter faltered mid-note. One rain-lashed afternoon, as they patched the roof, thunder growling like unmet needs, Riley paused, hammer dangling. "You're pulling back. Like I'm a guest who's overstayed." Evelyn wiped sweat from her brow, the shingles slick underfoot. "It's not you. It's everything catching up." They talked then, cross-legged on the widow's walk, the valley sprawling below in mist-shrouded greens. Evelyn confessed the terror of roots, how the house's sale had taught her love was transient, a lease that could expire. Riley listened, rain beating on her lashes like unshed truths. "My ma in Montana? She chose the church over me. Said I was a phase like bad weather. But phases pass, people don't." She reached out, fingers lacing with Evelyn's, the touch a current steadying the storm. In that moment the world narrowed to the warmth between palms, a promise etched in calluses. Lydia's confession came on a Sunday drive, the Volvo winding through covered bridges where moss clung like memories. "I knew about Clara," she said, voice barely audible over the engine's hum. "Overheard you girls. Thought if I ignored it, it'd fade. Like your daddy's drinking." Evelyn gripped the wheel, knuckles whitening against the leather. "You sold the house to run from us both." Silence stretched, broken only by the river's murmur below. Lydia's hand covered hers, tentative. "Forgive an old fool?" Evelyn didn't answer, but she didn't pull away, the gesture a seed in fallow soil. As summer crested, the house bloomed. Wild roses climbed the trellis, their petals soft as apologies, and Riley's murals took shape. Swirling eddies of blue and gold, symbols of currents that carried rather than drowned. Evelyn applied for the nonprofit status, her pitch to the county board laced with the raw poetry of survival. "It's not just walls," she told the panel, Riley's encouraging nod from the back row fueling her. "It's a return. For all of us." Approval came with stipends, a lifeline, and the first guest arrived. A young woman named Ellis from Albany, eyes haunted by fresh exile. Watching Ellis unpack in the guest room, Evelyn felt the fracture mend incrementally. Riley cooked that night, stew simmering with herbs from the garden, the table laden like a feast of second chances. Laughter rose, tentative at first, then full-throated, chasing shadows from the corners. Later, as crickets chorused outside, Evelyn and Riley lingered on the porch, shoulders touching. "This could be home," Riley whispered, and Evelyn leaned in, the space between them dissolving like mist at dawn. But dawn brings trials. Harlan's ghost, Lydia's late husband, manifested in a box of letters unearthed during attic cleanup, yellowed pages railing against unnatural ways. Evelyn read them aloud to Riley by lamplight, voice cracking on slurs that cut deeper than Vermont cold. Rage flared, hot and righteous, but Riley's hand on her arm tempered it. "Burn them," she said simply. "Make space." The fire crackled, consuming vitriol, and in the glow, Evelyn saw Riley anew, not as a tenant, but a partner in this reclamation. Fall painted the hills in fire, and with it came the shelter's soft launch. Word spread through networks, online forums, church whispers turned compassionate, and women trickled in. A teacher from Brattleboro, a mechanic from Concord, each carrying suitcases stuffed with hurts. Evelyn facilitated circles in the living room, candles flickering as stories unfurled like ribbons. Riley strummed guitar softly, chords weaving harmony from discord. One night, after a particularly raw sharing, a mother's ultimatum echoing Lydia's, Evelyn slipped outside, breath ragged. Riley followed, wrapping her in a blanket against the chill. "You're doing holy work," she said, forehead to forehead. Evelyn's tears soaked the wool. "With you." Intimacy grew like ivy tendrils testing cracks. A brush of fingers while passing tools. A shared glance across the breakfast table that lingered too long. Evelyn dreamed of Riley's compass tattoo, its arrows pointing inward, and woke with a yearning that scared her as much as it thrilled. "What if I break this too?" she confessed one twilight, leaves swirling at their feet. Riley cupped her face, thumbs tracing cheekbones. "Then we rebuild. Together." Lydia's thawing was slower, a glacier calving into gentler flows. She joined a session uninvited, perching on the edge like a bird unsure of flight. Her words tumbled out, regrets over the sale, the therapy, the silence. "I thought love meant protection. Turns out it means presence. Ellis, the young guest, reached for her hand, and the circle held its breath, then exhaled in nods and murmurs. Evelyn watched, chest loosening, the wound of years beginning to scar over, tender but whole. Winter loomed, promising snow that buried and blanketed alike. The shelter filled, beds creaking under weights lifted and shared. Evelyn and Riley stole moments. A walk along the frozen river, boots crunching ice, where Riley's gloves slipped off and their fingers intertwined, bare skin a quiet vow. "Stay," Evelyn said, the word a prayer. Riley's smile was sunrise. "Already have." Yet doubt nipped at heels like frost. A funding snag threatened utilities and old fears resurfaced. The house sold once, could it be lost again? Evelyn paced the attic, rain pattering like the day of betrayal. Riley found her there, curled amid dust motes. "We're not them," she said, pulling Evelyn to standing. "We're us." The kiss that followed was inevitable, soft as snowfall, deepening into a certainty that thawed the deepest chills. The kiss lingered in Evelyn's bones like the first frost of the season, a quiet revolution that reshaped the contours of her days. Mornings now carried Riley's scent, lavender soap and fresh earth from the garden plots they'd tilled together, mingling with the coffee's bitter warmth. They moved through the house with a new synchronicity, hands brushing in the narrow hallway, eyes meeting over the heads of guests with a secret smile that spoke volumes. Willow Creek, once a cage of memories, softened into a canvas, its hills rolling out invitations to build rather than flee. The shelter, now christened Haven House, pulsed with tentative life. Women came not just for beds but for the alchemy of shared silences turning to song. Mornings began with yoga on the lawn, Riley leading poses that stretched bodies and spirits alike, her voice a steady anchor. Breathe into the ache. Evelyn facilitated writing workshops in the sunroom, journals passed hand to hand, pages filling with ink that bled like healed wounds. Ellis, the first arrival, blossomed there, her poetry read aloud one evening, verses of bridges burned and rebuilt, drawing nods and tears from the circle. Lydia's involvement deepened, her presence a thread weaving past to present. She baked for communal suppers, apple crisp scented with cinnamon and the faint tang of forgiveness, her stories of young motherhood spilling over dessert like syrup. "Your daddy and I, we dreamed big for this place," she told a newcomer named Cora, a barista from Portland with eyes like storm clouds. "Picnics under the elms, you chasing skirts in the breeze." Cora laughed, a sound like cracking ice, and Evelyn caught her mother's glance, grateful, unguarded. The sale of the house, once a chasm, narrowed to a ravine they could peer across, voices carrying clearer. But harmony demands harmony's shadow. Winter clamped down hard that year, blizzards burying roads and testing resolve. Power flickered during a nor'easter. The house plunged into candlelit intimacy where fears surfaced like icebergs. One guest, a veteran named Dana from the Champlain Islands, unraveled in the night, nightmares of deployments and a wife's abandonment clawing her awake. Evelyn sat with her by the hearth, embers glowing like distant hopes, listening as Dana spoke of love as a casualty of war. "Feels like I sold my own home inside," she whispered. Evelyn nodded, the echo of her own loss a bridge. "Then let's buy it back, piece by piece." Riley's steadiness shone brightest in the gales. She shoveled paths at dawn, her breath clouding the air like incantations, an organized supply runs to town, the truck laden with canned goods and board games to ward off cabin fever. Yet beneath her calm, Evelyn glimpsed fractures, a phone call from Montana, her mother's voice tinny through static, laced with recriminations. "Church says you're still wandering." Riley hung up without reply, but later, in the attic amid boxes of unearthed relics, Evelyn's childhood dolls, Lydia's wedding veil, she let the mask slip. "Some sales are final," she said, folding lace with trembling hands. Evelyn drew her close, the veil draping over them like a shroud turned canopy. "Not ours." Spring's thaw brought expansion. Grants flowed freer now, whispers of Haven House reaching Burlington's queer center, where flyers promised a return to roots, whatever shape they take. Cora stayed on as volunteer coordinator, her energy a whirlwind that scheduled hikes up Mount Mansfield and art nights under strung bulbs. Evelyn watched Riley with the group, her guitar summoning choruses around bonfires, songs of rivers running true. One evening as flames danced shadows on faces, Riley dedicated a tune to the woman who bought back more than bricks. Eyes turned to Evelyn and she felt seen, not as the girl who'd lost everything, but the architect reclaiming it. Intimacy between them wove deeper, a tapestry of stolen glances and midnight confessions. They explored the property's edges, the hidden grove where wild columbine bloomed defiant, a swimming hole fed by snowmelt that chilled and cleansed. There, one golden afternoon, Riley traced the freckles across Evelyn's shoulders, water beating like jewels. "You're a map I want to memorize," she murmured, lips brushing collarbone. Evelyn arched into the touch, heart pounding like thunder retreating, their bodies aligning in a dance as natural as the current beside them. No rush, no desperation, just presence, a love that healed by being. Conflict crested with an unexpected visitor. June materializing on the porch like a specter from Portland's fog. She'd driven through the night, her car packed with regrets and a bottle of Evelyn's favorite bourbon. Saw the article in the Queer Mag. Had to see it for myself. Riley greeted her with polite distance, offering coffee while Evelyn's pulse raced. They walked the grounds, June's boots scuffing gravel, her words tumbling. Apologies for the note, confessions of her own aimless years. "You were my north, Ev. Still are, in a way." Evelyn listened, the old pull tugging faintly, but it dissolved against the solidity of Riley's waiting silhouette in the kitchen window. That night, turmoil churned. Evelyn confronted the mirror in her room, tracing the lines etched by time. The faint scar from a childhood fall, the curve of her mouth softened by Riley's kisses. "What am I afraid of?" she whispered to her reflection. Downstairs, Riley waited, journal open, her own words a bomb. "Love isn't a house to sell. It's the fire that warms it." They talked until stars wheeled overhead. Evelyn admitting the fear of impermanence. June's arrival a test of roots she'd only begun to trust. Riley's embrace was answer enough, steady as the hills. Lydia's full surrender came at solstice, the longest day spilling light like grace. She arrived with a deed, her life savings co-signed to the shelter's mortgage, a gesture wordless but profound. "No more running," she said, handing it over amid the garden's riot of blooms. Evelyn's tears fell unchecked, watering the earth where new seeds waited. The circle that evening swelled, women toasting with cider, voices rising in a hymn of return. Cora read a poem for Lydia, lines of mothers as maples, deep-rooted, sheltering, and the older woman wept, held by hands she'd once pushed away. Summer deepened the bonds. Haven House hosted its first retreat, a weekend of workshops and walks, where participants planted saplings along the riverbank, symbols of growth amid floods. Riley led a session on forgiveness, her Montana drawl weaving tales of prairies vast enough for second chances. Evelyn spoke last, voice steady. "I bought back a house, but you all gave me a home." Applause rippled, warm as sunlight, and in the hush that followed, Riley's hand found hers under the table, fingers interlacing like vines. Yet growth invites pruning. A local councilman, voice thick with old prejudices, challenged the shelter's zoning at a town hall, pamphlets decrying moral decay, scattered like leaves. Whispers turned to stares in the co-op, and Evelyn's resolve wavered, the specter of sale rearing anew. Riley rallied them, petitions circulated, allies from Burlington marching with signs reading, "Love is local." Lydia testified, her voice quavering but firm. "This house held my daughter's heart once. Now it holds hope." The vote passed narrowly, victory tasting of sweat and solidarity. In the afterglow, Evelyn and Riley retreated to the attic, the space transformed into a studio of sorts, easels and star charts, a telescope angled at the Milky Way. They lay on a pallet of quilts, Riley's head on Evelyn's chest, heartbeat a lullaby. "What now?" Evelyn asked, fingers combing blonde strands. Riley's reply was a kiss, slow and sure. "Now we live it." Autumn's palette returned, golds and crimsons mirroring the fire within. The shelter thrived, guests cycling through but leaving imprints, poems carved in guest books, recipes pinned to the fridge. Evelyn's journal filled with entries not of loss but legacy. Today, a woman smiled for the first time in months. Riley's doing. One crisp morning as mist rose from the river, Evelyn proposed. Not with rings but with a key etched with their initials. "To all the doors will open." Riley's yes was a vow, sealed with laughter and leaves crunching underfoot. Forgiveness, Evelyn learned, was not a single bloom but a garden tended through seasons of drought and deluge. With the councilman's defeat, Haven House stood firmer, its foundation shored not just by beams but by the collective exhale of those who'd claimed it as sanctuary. Women arrived in greater numbers now. A librarian from Portsmouth fleeing a partner's denial, a student from Dartmouth grappling with parental ultimatums, their stories threading into the house's warp and weft like rivers converging. Lydia's role evolved into quiet guardianship. She tended the herb garden out back, rows of sage and thyme releasing scents that warded off melancholy, her hands, once clenched in fear, now open to soil and conversation. Evenings found her on the porch with Cora, the two sharing mugs of chamomile while fireflies scripted Morse code in the dusk. "You remind me of Evelyn at your age," Lydia told her once, voice soft as moth wings. "Stubborn hope." Cora's grin flashed, a beacon. "Learned from the best." Through these exchanges, Evelyn glimpsed her mother's unraveling regrets. The sale of the house, a scar faded to silver thread. Riley and Evelyn's love deepened in the dailies, the way Riley hummed off-key while scrubbing pots, or how Evelyn's sketches of the property now included Riley's figure, blurred at edges like cherished dreams. They hiked the long trail on weekends, boots tracing paths worn by wanderers before them, pausing at overlooks where the green mountains unfolded like an unrolled map. At one such vista, wind whipping hair into halos, Riley pulled a small box from her pack. Not a ring but a pair of locket halves etched with compass points. "For the parts we carried together." Evelyn fastened hers, the click a covenant, their foreheads touching as eagles wheeled below. Yet understanding demanded descent into depths. A letter from Clara arrived unbidden, forwarded from an old address. A wedding invitation, her union to a man in Seattle, words laced with nostalgia. "Heard about your Haven. Proud of the woman you became. Wish we'd navigated better." Evelyn read it alone in the library nook, pages trembling, the past rising like groundwater. Anger first, how dare she after the silence? Then sorrow, a tide pulling at moorings. She shared it with Riley over dawn patrol, coffee steaming between them. "Feels like unfinished business." Riley nodded, no judgment in her gaze. "Then finish it. Write back or burn it. But don't carry it alone." The response Evelyn penned was a letter unsent, poured onto paper in the attic's slant light. Admissions of hurt, gratitude for the awakening, a gentle release. Burning it in the garden fire pit, flames curling the edges, she felt the weight lift, embers ascending like prayers answered. Lydia witnessed from afar, joining later with a trowel. "Clara was your first heartbreak." "I added to it." Evelyn knelt beside her, dirt-caking nails. "You were scared." "I see that now." The hug that followed was fierce, bodies rocking like willows in wind, forgiveness a root system intertwining. The shelter's rhythm pulsed with purpose. Workshops expanded, trauma circles led by a therapist from White River Junction, art therapy where canvases bloomed with colors of reclamation. Dana, the veteran, returned as a mentor, her steady presence guiding hikes that mapped inner terrains. One retreat focused on family rifts, prompts drawing out tales of sales literal and figurative, homes bartered for acceptance, identities auctioned to silence. Evelyn facilitated, her voice a compass. "What if returning isn't about them but us?" Tears flowed, then laughter, the room a chrysalis cracking open. Riley's vulnerabilities surfaced in waves. A call from Bozeman escalated, her brother, swayed by church elders, demanding she repent or renounce inheritance. Riley paced the riverbank, phone discarded in pebbles, her face a storm front. Evelyn found her there, skipping stones that skipped heartbreak. "They sold my place in the family long ago," Riley said, voice raw. "But it still stings." They sat until dusk, Evelyn's arm around her, words weaving nets. "Your place is here, with women who choose you every day." That night, Riley sketched a mural extension. A family tree with branches twisting toward light, no pruners in sight. The Thursday extended outward. Evelyn invited the councilman for coffee, not confrontation but curiosity, a neutral ground in the diner's worn booths. He arrived gruff, mustache twitching, but listened as she spoke of the house's history, the sale that scarred her. "Fear makes us sell what we love," she said, stirring cream into black. His nod was grudging then genuine. Lost a sister to silence like that. Maybe. Support next budget. It wasn't absolution but alliance. A crack in the edifice of judgment. Summer's zenith brought a milestone. Haven House's first anniversary. Guests past and present gathered, the lawn a tapestry of blankets and lanterns. Lydia emceed, her toast halting but heartfelt. This house was sold once, but love bought it back tenfold. Riley performed, guitar strumming ballads of return, her eyes locking on Evelyn's during the chorus. And the river runs home. Dinner was potluck abundance. Cornbread from Cora, wild berry pie from Dana, followed by a bonfire where letters of release were consigned to flames, sparks rising like liberated souls. In the hush after, Evelyn and Riley slipped away to the swimming hole, moonlight silvering the water. They waded in, coolness shocking skin, bodies drawing close in the current's embrace. You've taught me understanding starts with listening, Evelyn whispered, lips to Riley's temple. Riley's hand spanned her waist, anchoring. And forgiveness? It's choosing the light every dawn. Their kiss deepened, a renewal, the stars above mirroring the fire below. Fall's harvest yielded abundance. The garden overflowed, jars of preserves lining shelves like talismans. A new grant funded solar panels, the house tilting toward sustainability. A metaphor Evelyn cherished. Conflicts arose in micro, jealousies among guests, a funding delay that pinched budgets, but they navigated with circles, voices amplifying until consensus bloomed. Lydia's health faltered briefly, a flu that lingered, confining her to bed with books and broth. Evelyn nursed her, reading aloud from the attic's trove. Passages from Carson McCullers, tales of lonely hearts finding kin. You were always the storyteller, Lydia murmured, hand in hers. Forgive me for silencing you. Evelyn's throat tightened. Already did, Mom. 100 times. As leaves turned, Riley proposed a road trip, west to Montana, not for confrontation but closure. They drove through amber waves, the Volvo humming hymns. At the ranch, Riley's mother waited on the porch, Bible in lap, eyes wary. No grand reconciliation but a shared meal, words exchanged like fragile china. I sold your childhood for my peace, the woman admitted. Riley's hand squeezed Evelyn's under the table. Peace isn't peace without family. They left with a quilt, faded but warm, and a lightness in Riley's step. Back in Willow Creek, winter whispered warnings, but the house glowed against it. Holiday lights strung the eaves, illuminating paths for late arrivals. Evelyn and Riley hosted a Yule gathering, wassail steaming, stories circling the tree they'd felled from the woodlet. To returns, they toasted, glasses clinking like bells. One snow-dusted night as flakes danced outside, Evelyn traced Riley's tattoo by firelight. This shelter. It's us. Forgiven, understood. Riley's smile was dawn. And loved. Rebirth stirred in the quiet aftermath of forgiveness, like sap rising in maples after the longest night. Haven House, once a hollow shell of Evelyn's past, now thrummed with the vitality of lives reclaimed. Breakfast chatter in the sunroom, laughter echoing from the muraled halls, the scent of rising bread a constant hymn to renewal. Evelyn woke each morning to this symphony, Riley's form beside her a living talisman, their shared bed a plot where old seeds sprouted anew. The shelter's evolution mirrored Evelyn's own. With funding secured, expansions took root. A greenhouse for year-round greens, symbolizing growth undeterred by frost. A small stage in the barn for open mics, where voices once muted now soared. Cora spearheaded a mentorship program, pairing newcomers with elders like Dana. Their walks along the river forging bonds as enduring as the waters carved through stone. Evelyn oversaw it all, her journal evolving from laments to litanies of gratitude. Entries noting a guest's first unapologetic smile, or the way Lydia's garden yielded enough lavender to scent every pillow. Riley's influence infused the air with creativity. Her theater background birthed story circles, evenings where women enacted their narratives, shadow puppets dancing loss into triumph, improv scenes turning exile to embrace. One production retold Evelyn's homecoming, actors as ghosts of the house, culminating in a chorus of We Return. Tears streamed freely, catharsis a river washing clean. Riley directed with gentle fire, Her cue's a reminder. Rebirth isn't erasure. It's etching deeper. Evelyn's inner landscape shifted too. Dreams of the sail receded, replaced by visions of the attic as airy. Wings unfurling, not hiding. She took up painting, canvases blooming with Vermeers of the valley. Riley knee-deep in wildflowers, Lydia bent over herbs, guests silhouetted against sunsets. One piece, Threshold, captured the porch at twilight. Figures stepping through, shadows lengthening into light. Hanging it in the foyer, Evelyn felt the fracture in her chest seal, scar tissue strong as birch bark. Lydia's rejuvenation was profoundest. Post-illness, she shed layers of caution, volunteering at the local library to stock Queer Lit in the young adult section. Titles like Annie on My Mind tucked beside classics. Better late than never, she quipped to Evelyn over tea, her laugh a new bloom. They collaborated on a memoir workshop for elders, Lydia sharing drafts of her own. Vignettes of the house's heyday, the sales sting, a daughter's return as redemption. Reading aloud, her voice steady, Evelyn saw the woman her mother might have been. Unburdened, bold. Challenges arose as rebirth demands labor. A harsh spring flood swelled the river, lapping at foundations, forcing sandbags in solidarity. Guests and staff alike waded in. Muck boots sucking mud, voices raised in work songs Riley improvised. We rise with the waters, she belted, and they did. House spared, spirits tempered like steel. In the cleanup, bonds forged tighter. A newcomer named Harper, artist from Asheville, sketched the deluge as baptism, her piece adorning the new community wall. Evelyn and Riley's union flowered in privacy's garden. Weekends meant escapes to neighboring glades, picnics under hemlocks, where they'd read poetry aloud, Pablo Neruda's verses igniting skin like summer heat. Intimacy was exploration. Riley's fingers mapping Evelyn's spine like longitude lines. Evelyn's breath ghosting Riley's collar as they swayed to phantom music. You're my renaissance, Evelyn whispered once. Bodies entwined in the hammock, leaves rustling approval. Riley's reply was touch, a language of revival. Externally, rebirth rippled. Media caught wind. A Burlington Free Press feature on Vermont's Heart of Haven, drawing volunteers from afar. Evelyn keynote at a Montpelier conference, her talk from sale to sanctuary, weaving personal thread with communal cloth. Standing at the podium, Riley in the front row, she spoke of the house as metaphor. We all have homes sold from under us by family, fear, fate. Rebirth is buying back the blueprint, building bolder. Applause thundered, a downpour nourishing. Internally, Evelyn confronted lingering thorns. A therapy session unearthed resentment toward her father, not for leaving, but for the void that prompted the sale. Dr. Ellis, now retired but consulting via video, guided. Grieve the man, not the myth. Evelyn visited his grave in the town cemetery. Wild grasses whispering, laying a stone-etched return. Rain fell, mingling with tears, a ritual washing the last silt. Riley's art crested in Montana's shadow. She penned letters to her brother. Not pleas but portraits of her life, Haven House as proof of thriving. Responses came sparse then warm. A photo of his kids, caption Aunt Riley. It wasn't full mending but grafting new growth from old stock. Celebrating with Evelyn over pie at the diner, Riley's eyes shone. Reborn in pieces but whole. Summer solstice marked the shelter's pivot. A rebirth festival. Lawn alive with booths, yoga flows, pie-eating contests. A symbolic deed burning for past pains. Lydia lit the pyre, her hand steady. Guests adding slips of paper to the blaze. Evelyn and Riley danced under lanterns, bodies swaying to fiddles, the night a tapestry of touch and twirl. Later in the grove they renewed their key vow, burying a capsule with letters to future selves. We rose. Fall brought harvest and hiring. Cora promoted to director, her vision expanding outreach to rural queer youth. Evelyn stepped back slightly, pursuing a certification in counseling, her studies a personal renaissance. Nights found her poring over texts by lamplight, Riley massaging shoulders knotted by knowledge. Winter's hush amplified inner blooms. Snow sculpted the landscape, Haven House a lantern against white. They hosted hearth nights, storytelling by fire, tales of phoenix flights. One evening Dana shared her engagement to a carpenter from Stowe, the room erupting in cheers. Evelyn's heart swelling at love's multiplicity. Evelyn's rebirth culminated in a solo rite. Climbing the attic stairs at dawn, she opened the window to the awakening valley, locket glinting. "I am home," she breathed, the words a mantra. Below, Riley waved from the garden, a figure of fidelity. As spring teased buds, Evelyn felt the transformation complete, not erasure of scars, but their honoring as maps to this verdant now. Light broke fully in the hush of rebirth's bloom, casting Haven House in a glow that seemed to emanate from within. Walls once shadowed now radiant, windows framing vistas of possibility rather than loss. Evelyn moved through her days with a lightness akin to the first green haze on branches, each step a affirmation of the journey from fracture to flourish. The shelter under Cora's capable helm had become a beacon, its directory listing Haven House, where love returns home, inquiries pouring in like spring rains. Lydia's light shone undimmed. Fully immersed, she launched a Roots and Remedies series, herbal teas paired with oral histories, gatherings where elders like her shared recipes for resilience. One session drew a crowd from across the river, her voice carrying tales of the house's jazz-age dances, the sale's sorrow, Evelyn's return as epiphany. "Light follows the dark like dawn after vigil," she concluded, and Evelyn in the back wiped eyes brimming with pride. Their bond, once frayed as attic cobwebs, now gleamed like polished oak. Weekly teas on the porch, Lydia's stories met with Evelyn's attentive nods, a reciprocity of revelation. Riley and Evelyn's love matured into a quiet luminescence, a partnership that illuminated the ordinary. Mornings began with shared journals, pages passed over toast, entries of dreams and gratitudes intertwining like their fingers. Afternoons meant collaborative projects. Riley's murals extended to the greenhouse, vines of color climbing glass, Evelyn adding verses etched in frost. Evenings were sanctuaries, baths drawn with Epsom and eucalyptus, bodies reclining in steam-shrouded tubs, conversations meandering from shelter logistics to the stars' silent wisdom. "You're my constant north," Riley would say, tracing Evelyn's locket, and the words settled like sunlight on still water. The shelter's community flourished, a mosaic of lives alight. Dana's wedding wove through summer, Haven House the venue, barns decked in wildflowers, guests from every chapter toasting under arbors. Evelyn officiated, voice steady. "In this house of returns may your love be the light that guides." Cheers rose, fireflies mirroring joy, and Riley's hand in hers pulsed with shared wonder. Harper, the flood sketch artist, opened a studio on site, her classes birthing works that captured rebirth's hues, canvases of shattered pottery mended with gold. Yet light acknowledges its dance with shade. A donor pulled funding over ideological concerns, a sting that tested tempers. Cora rallied bake sales and grants, her optimism infectious, while Evelyn penned op-eds for the Valley News, framing the shelter as Vermont's heartline. "Love isn't luxury, it's lifeline," she wrote, submissions landing in broader outlets, the New York Times opinion page, sparking national murmurs. Volunteers surged, checks arriving with notes. "Your light reached me." Evelyn's counseling certification bore fruit in deeper dives, one-on-one sessions in the sunroom, where she held space for unravelings. A teen named Eliza, escaped from a conservative enclave in the Northeast Kingdom, arrived hollow-eyed but hungry for hope. Over weeks, Evelyn guided her through grief's labyrinth, walks along the river revealing glimmers. "I see myself now not as broken but bending." Eliza's departure for college came with hugs and a painting. Evelyn amid light beams, captioned "Shelter Keeper." Riley's Montana reconciliation deepened. Visits home yielded mended fences, her brother attending a virtual workshop, his questions earnest. A family quilt arrived, patched with new squares, symbol of inclusion. Celebrating, they drove to Lake Champlain at sunset, toes in shallows, Riley's head on Evelyn's lap. "Light forgives the long night," she murmured, and Evelyn kissed her crown, the water lapping lullabies. Lydia's legacy crystallized in autumn. Diagnosed with early arthritis, she refused diminishment, co-authoring a cookbook, Haven Hearth, Recipes for the Soul, proceeds bolstering the shelter. Launch at the county fair drew locals, her readings blending lore with laughter. Evelyn contributed a foreword. "From selling dreams to serving hope, my mother's light endures." Sails soared, Lydia's grin wide as the harvest moon. Winter wrapped the house in crystalline hush, holidays a tapestry of traditions reborn. They strung lights shaped like locket keys, hosted solstice suppers with star-shaped cookies and songs. Guests shared heirlooms, faded photos, embroidered handkerchiefs, circles closing with toasts to enduring glows. One eve, snow blanketing meadows, Evelyn and Riley skied the back trails, lanterns bobbing like fireflies in white. At the overlook, breathless and beaming, Riley pulled a velvet pouch. Twin rings, simple gold with inlaid maple leaves. "Marry me in this light?" Evelyn's yes shattered the silence, joy echoing off hills. Spring symphony heralded new chapters. Cora announced her pregnancy, the shelter's nursery a future wing. Evelyn, now adjunct at a local community college, taught narratives of resilience. Students' essays echoing her own arc. Riley's theater troupe toured, performances of return rites packing houses, her dedications always to the woman who lit my way. Anniversary dawned golden, the second marking not just survival but sovereignty. Festival swelled, music from fiddlers, booths of art and advocacy, a river blessing with petals afloat. Lydia emceed again, voice carrying. This house sold once but love repurchased it infinite. Evelyn and Riley, hands clasped, cut a cake layered like their story, dark chocolate base yielding to cream and berry bright. As dusk fell, guests dispersed in twos and threes, lanterns guiding paths. Evelyn and Riley retreated to the attic, now observatory, telescope trained on emerging stars. What legacy do we leave? Evelyn pondered, Riley's warmth at her back. This light, in every heart we touched. They made love there, slow as starlight, bodies a constellation of constancy. Years folded forward, Haven House a homestead of hope. Lydia passed gently in her 80s, surrounded by kin chosen and born, her ashes scattered in the garden, fertilizing blooms eternal. Evelyn and Riley married on the porch, rings exchanged under that same swing, vows vowing vigilance to light. Decades on, Evelyn, silvered but steadfast, watched grandnieces chase fireflies, Riley's hand in hers, the house a haven still. "We turned sail to salvation," she'd say to visitors, eyes on the horizon. And in that gaze, light infinite, a world reborn.